Hello, everybody. My name is Tom Mondor, and I am one of the regional sales managers for Gusmer Enterprises, and I'm welcoming you here today to participate in the third of 3 Denwell webinars. This one that we're going to be talking about today is on carbo-blending and dosing, and we're going to talk a little bit about how this can apply to hard seltzer manufacturing, but also high gravity brewing, and then dosing too can really be used in a lot of different places in the brewery. So I know a lot of our customers may not be super familiar with carbo-blending, but we're going to get into that today. The agenda is just a quick overview of Gusmer Enterprises and our partner Denwell. And then we're going to go over exactly what blending or carbo-blending is, as well as inline dosing. Then we'll go through some application or general tips on how this can be used and how it can improve your processes at your breweries. And then Mike Majorco, the product manager for Denwell, will be going over the different system options that we have available with Denwell. And then at the very end, we will have a question and answer session. And I will please remind you that if you do have questions that come up during the presentation, we'll address them all at the end. But just type them in the Q&A boxes instead of the regular chat box. That way they're all in one place and they're easy to find, and we can answer them in an orderly fashion at the end. So as I mentioned, I'm the regional sales manager, or one of the regional sales managers for Gusmer. If you don't know who your rep is, or you're looking for additional information, I encourage you to head over to gusmerenterprises.com. At the very top of the website, there's a little link, as you can see there, find a rep. Just type in your city and state and what industry you're looking for and hit the go button, and it will bring you to whoever your rep is in the area. As you can see for Minnesota, I'm the rep for there, but I also cover Iowa and Minnesota and Eastern Canada. But if you have any questions, typically our website can answer them pretty quick. And now just a little quick overview with Gusmer. You know, our motto is service with knowledge, and I feel like that is it's a very true statement. You know, all of us technical sales reps are trained, and we really like to pride ourselves on our knowledge of the industry and the processes that we're helping you with, and take a consultative approach to working with our customers. Gusmer as a company was founded back in 1918, and it's currently in its 3rd generation of family ownership. And our real strengths are fermentation and filtration products and services for the food, beverage, and biotech or pharmaceutical industries. We have a couple different manufacturing plants, one in California, one in Wisconsin, as well as some R&D plants in both areas. We have 15 direct technical sales representatives, and as I said, you can find that through our website if you don't know who your sales rep is. We also have a number of different product managers and application specialists that help us technical sales reps do our jobs and get us the information that we need in a timely manner. And then, as I mentioned, we also have a number of different R&D scientists operating both out of California and Wisconsin. And if you do live in California, we also have a number of stores in Napa and Windsor. If you need to pick up anything for your winemaking or beer making needs, those stores do typically have a retail outlet, or they have a retail outlet, excuse me. So you can pick up things like yeast and nutrients and filter media. Now to just go over Denwell real quick. Denwell was founded in 1997. It's a privately owned, independent company with the manufacturing and headquarters in the Czech Republic. It's important to note that the owners and the founders were industry insiders, you know, really understand the industry as a whole, and are still present and oversee the day-to-day engineering and sales development. So they're really involved with the company still. Denwell as a company is flexible and has a lot of solutions, as you can see there at the bottom, for the beverage industry. And while they do sell skid-mounted, you know, solutions that are quick to implement, kind of plug and play ideas, they do have a number of customization options. So if you do have a unique situation, or you're looking for something a little bit more expanded than you want to possibly integrate multiple systems together, that is definitely something they can do. They are extremely knowledgeable about the products that they manufacture, and have been a wonderful partner to work with since we partnered with them. All right, so let's get into inline carbo blending and dosing. So if you're not familiar with blending or carbo blending, for the larger brewing operations, it is kind of the industry standard. So essentially what we're doing is we're taking high gravity wort or wash, or sugar wash, and brewing it to a high alcohol content. So instead of starting with like a 12 Plato beer, you'd be brewing at possibly at 20 Plato or higher even. And so you're getting a product that isn't really at sale strength. And then you would blend it down with dehydrated water, which is required for this process typically, to get to the alcohol content and the flavor profile that you're looking for. So the skids that we have, there's a blending skids and carbo blending skids. The carbo blending is a blending option that also introduces carbonation at the same time. So it's a single step process where you are introducing dehydrated water into the system, blending down to your desired alcohol content, and then carbonating at the same time. Real great equipment to create your products quickly and economically. The blenders do have inline alcohol analyzers, and the carbo blenders also have CO2 analyzers that feedback to the PLC, so that you are constantly staying within your specs and parameters. I did mention that typically this process does require dehydrated water, which is another system that Denwell does provide. There are other options out there, but typically you're taking dehydrated water, which is water that has the oxygen more or less taken out of it. It is sanitized typically through a UV light, and then blended in. And there are options too to partially carbonate the water on its way to the carbo blender. The blending and the CO2 injection occurs immediately. So what I mean by that is the system that you see there, you can see the pump in the back and the pipe work that goes back and forth. That is all you really need for the mixing and saturation of the CO2. The Denwell injector, which is the CO2 apparatus that sends the gas into solution, creates these little tiny micro bubbles that basically instantly saturate the beer or the hard seltzer. And then the blending takes place typically at that pump. So there are no extra pipes that you need, typically no tanks that you need. It all happens at the point of the Denwell equipment skid. And it is fully CIP compatible. So what that means essentially is that there's nothing to really take apart to clean. If you're familiar with carbonating in your tank, you're using a CO2 or a sintered stone. Those are extremely difficult to clean. And with this system, with the Denwell injector, it's essentially just a stainless steel pipe. So there are no mixers or agitators outside that pump. And so when you're CIPing, the PLC makes it easy, and everything happens right there in line with nothing to really disassemble. The other portion of this, especially when we're talking about making things like hard seltzers, is that the dosing of the flavors. So maybe you're making flavored beers or seltzers, or maybe you're trying to add in stabilizing agents like silica. The inline dosing equipment, which we'll see some pictures of a little bit later here, they do it in line. It can use powders or liquids. It's controlled via PLC with a HMI, so it's just a touch screen that's super easy to use. And it can pull from chemical drums or flavors drums, storage vessels, whether that's onboard storage vessels or storage vessels at your facility, or agitated mixing tanks. So if whatever you're adding does need some sort of mixing or heating, those are things too that we can work on and make sure that you get. As far as flavorings, we'll go into it a little bit here in the next slide, but basically I think the hardest part is really getting standardized flavors across brands, and with an inline dosing system, that kind of takes the headache out of that. It is all managed by the PLC. So we'll move on here. So just a couple application tips. So why are we carbo blending? Why are we using this equipment? The biggest thing is to maximize tank space. So if you're a brewery who's looking to make a hard seltzer, but you still got to make all your other beer still, brewing high gravity is an easy way to take essentially a clear, odorless base, brew it at a high gravity, and then blend it down with dehydrated water to produce 5%, 6%, whatever it ends up being, hard seltzer. It can essentially, really grow your business as far as not having to add on a second cellar or add in tanks. You can utilize your existing equipment to produce more product, and that's a huge selling point and the reason companies use this technology. No batching. So when you're adding it in, that onboard PLC using the CO2 and the alcohol analyzers will be constantly monitoring and adjusting so that your final product is what you're looking for. So you don't have to fill a tank part way with the product you want and then try to fill it with water and then try to hook up a pump or some other mixing apparatus, or maybe using a CO2 stone to mix the product together. This is all taken care of at the point of the skid. And so you don't have to worry about that batching. And it takes a lot of the headache out of variability between batches from different recipes and from person to person too, depending on SOP. Sometimes people have slightly different ways of getting to the same endpoint, but using a system like this takes that headache away. Quality, consistency, and compliance. So as everyone knows, when you're fermenting, we get pretty used to where our starting gravities start and where our final gravities end and our alcohol content, but things happen and sometimes they're out of spec a little bit. Using this skid, the Carbo-Blending, allows you to add that dehydrated water in to meet your specifications on their package label, or that you have registered through the TTB every single time, which is huge, I think, for some folks. And consistency. So every single time you're making a product, it's coming out the same way. Even a 3% or 0.3% swing on alcohol, that can affect flavor. And so when you are constantly getting the same exact product, your customers are going to be happy. Versatility. So while I have talked about the blending portion of this, it does just carbonate as well. So you don't have to blend every single time you're using this equipment. It can act as just a carbonator. So not everyone's going to be high gravity brewing everything. So you can run your regular product through here that's already at sales alcohol levels through it and carbonate it like you would a different Denwell carbonation skid. So it really has a lot of versatility that way. It doesn't need to just be used for carbo blending. And then on the inline dosing side, as I mentioned, you can use flavors, stabilizing agents like silica or PVPP or other products. If you're doing hard seltzers, you're thinking about flavorings, but you're also looking at possibly adding in citric acid for pH adjustment, for maybe improving the flavor a little bit, your citrus flavors, or malic acid to improve some of your berry flavors. Those can be added in as a powder and mixed and injected directly into your stream equally, across your product, so that everything at the end point of sale is exactly the same. You also use it for CIP chemicals as well. So if you're using the system, maybe you have it set up with your packaging line or your centrifuge, you can use that dosing system to safely inject CIP solution into the system for cleaning. Easy CIP, I already touched on this a little bit, but with a sintered stone, you can't really clean it. With this system, it is super easy to clean. You just hook it up with the rest of your equipment, and it's treated as a pipe, more or less. Good flow rates and correct chemical dosing will keep it clean and make sure that there's no issues in the future. And then the time, labor, and ingredient savings. So I think it's pretty evident about the time and the labor. If you're high gravity brewing, most times, especially with like hard seltzers, you're just adding a little bit more sugar, maybe a little bit more time during fermentation. But you're not doing multiple batches. You don't have the labor costs of doing multiple batches. You don't have the space, the real estate in your brewery doing multiple batches either. So it had a lot of savings that way. And same with ingredients. With like CO2, if you're carbonating in the tank, especially if you're tight on time sometimes, blasting CO2 through your carbonating stone can be detrimental to flavor and aroma for your products, but it can also really waste a lot of gas. Anything that's not going into solutions going out into the headspace. With a system like this, the CO2 has instant saturation at the point of application, and you're not wasting additional materials or additional CO2, excuse me. And then on the flavoring side as well, making sure that you're getting the exact dosage rates that you want, the exact flavor profiles that you want every single time, no accidents. And there's a lot to be said about the ability to improve your processes all across your brands. I think that is where I end up here. Next up is going to be Mike Majorco. As I mentioned earlier, he's the Denwell product manager. Mike, would you mind taking over, please?
Sure, Tom, certainly. Thank you for the introduction. And you could switch to the next slide for me, please. And we'll start talking about the system options as far as the equipment that's offered from Denwell. Tom has really covered a lot of this. Some of this will be review for me. But, so we have a blending equipment for high gravity alcohol or product, with deaerated water. And then we have the Carbo-Blending, as we've discussed here, where we are not just blending, but also carbonating in line. And then we have the ingredient and additive dosing, which, as Tom mentioned, can be used to add most anything that you could need to into your process or product in your plant. And then finally, I wanted to touch a bit on sort of some of the custom combination skids that you can get that kind of group multiple functions all into one convenient unit that maybe comes at a bit of a price advantage as well over buying everything separately. Next slide, please, Tom. So in addition to the broader equipment, we do have some automation differences too. There are semi-auto units. Basically, all the equipment we're going to talk about today come in one of two or one or two options here. And this would be semi-automated units, where basically we have a PLC running a ratio controlled system where you would enter the values that you want for your brand, for your particular product. And then the PLC adjusts the ratios of the two while going through the system in order to arrive at the correct parameters for the product. And then the other option, broadly speaking, would be the fully automated ones. And this would be where you really require a very high degree of precision. We're talking like maybe 0.01% or something like that, where we have then analyzer controlled feedback. So you not only do you have the ratio control being operated by the PLC, but you have an analyzer, whether it be for carbon dioxide or alcohol content or what have you, that's actually controlling the ratio on the valves. So you're getting sort of a real-time feedback to get the highest degree of precision that you could possibly ask for. And then, of course, as I touched on before, the combination skids, and we'll get into that in more detail later. Next slide, please, Tom. So blending would just be standalone blending. And this would be something that would be useful for you if this concept of high gravity brewing, or maybe creating a seltzer or another type of alcoholic or hard product is appealing to you, and you already happen to have an inline carbonator. You already have a solution for carbonating the beverage in question. So this would just take your deaerated water source and your alcohol source, your product source, and blend them at whatever ratio you need. As I mentioned before, this could come then in two different automation configurations, either the semi-automated ratio controlled or the fully automatic analyzer controlled. And it's able to handle 0 to 20 Plato and 0 to 10 ABV as far as input output. It comes in a really broad range of sizes, from 1.5 to 6 inch. So really covers a broad range of production capabilities that a brewery could have. And basically what that means is anywhere from 9 to 852 barrels per hour, which as you can tell is quite a broad range and would cover most customers' needs. And I mean, this thing could blend up to 100% if you needed it to, or really anything, probably between 0 and that. And they're relatively compact, as you can see the dimensions here for the skid. But that being said, if the standard dimensions, as Tom mentioned, Denwell is very flexible in their engineering. And if there's a standard dimension that's given that doesn't work for your footprint, then typically Denwell is able to make it custom dimensions for these pieces of equipment, within reason. Next slide, please. So carbo-blending, as we touched on before, would be the combination of the blending of your deaerated water and high concentration product, with then adding the inline carbonation feature. And as Tom mentioned before too, the versatility of this equipment where you can blend, carbonate, or carbo-blend, just depending on what it is that you need to do. So I guess the point is that you don't necessarily need to get separate standalone pieces of equipment. This is to a certain extent a combination skid because it offers both carbonation and blending together. Again, comes in both a semi-automated ratio controlled system or fully automated analyzer controlled system. And as far as carbonation, we can add up to 3 volumes, of course, depending on the temperature of the liquid going through the unit and the pressure on the system. And as with the blender, it comes in a broad range of sizes, from 1 to 6 inch, and again can do, that should be 1.5 to 6 inches, and is able to do 9 to 852 barrels per hour. Again, just if we wanted to talk about how you do this, you could set any of these systems, regardless of semi or fully automatic, for the parameters of your brand, and then you just have the highest degree of control if you've got analyzer controlled on the full automatic, and really still a pretty great degree of control even in the ratio controlled semi-automatic units. And again, you can have a variety of different dimensions, and if you can't quite fit the standard one, talk to us. We'll see if we can accommodate your dimensions in the equipment. Next slide, please. So going back to dosing here, as Tom mentioned before, these pieces of equipment could be implemented in multiple places in your plant, depending on what it is that you want to dose. Pretty much anything that you could want to dose in line into process or product stream can be handled by these units down to pretty fine percentage dosing points. And so they can be equipped. These are essentially custom pieces of equipment too. No two of them are really going to be the same because it all depends on what your process is, what you need to dose into what. And this could be something like a prepared flavoring ingredient that comes out of a 20 gallon jerry can or something like that needs to be dosed at a certain ratio, and you just add the tube. This could be a non-prepared flavor ingredient, that could even be in dry form. So you could have a purged agitated tank that can make this up in the deaerated water. Say if you are making a rattler and you need to add the Country Time lemonade into your beer stream on its way through. Additionally, as Tom mentioned before, these can also be used for process aids, things like silica gel or PVPP, or probably even colloidal silica you could use in these units as well. Or if you've got one set up to your CIP system so that you can add in, your caustic acid and whatever other, CIP and sterilization chemicals used in your brewing. These are semi-automatic, so they will just be PLC controlled based upon your inputs. And, as I mentioned, you can have as many dosing streams of as many types, right, whether liquid or dry, as you want, starting with one, of course, and then, I don't know, within reason, the sky's the limit beyond that. And then again, comes in a broad range of sizes, 1.5 to 4 inch, and can handle a pretty broad range of flows as well. Next slide, please. And this is now getting into the combination equipment that I wanted to talk about. This is a relatively new concept that Denwell has created, and they call it the Seltzer system. And I really, although that was the hard seltzer trend was kind of the impetus behind the design for this particular unit. I think we can all stretch our imaginations to sort of come up with what other uses a piece of equipment like this could have in our plants. Whether you want to do RTD cocktails or, even if you're looking into making craft soft drinks, or flavored beers, I mean, you name it. And this is basically a combination semi-automated skid that takes raw inputs as far as, maybe an alcohol stream, deaerated water, and flavor units, and creates ready-to-drink beverages that are ready to be packaged off of the back end of it here. So this combination here is, of course, as you can see, we've got the water deaeration column, the cold unit. That's the tall part there. So you're going to create your deaerated water, which is one of your ingredients. Then you've got a compact dosing unit on here, which again can be customized to have as many dosing streams of whatever type that you need. And then you've got the Carbo-Blender on here as well. And so I guess the point again too with this is that, all of the functions can be used independently. Depending on what your use is, you can just change the parameters in the PLC. And if you only need deaerated water to be produced by the thing, it can do that. If you just need to flavor deaerated carbonated water, you can do that as well. If you want to make your own soft seltzer, or if you then want to add in an alcohol blending stream, that's another thing that you can do with this too. So it's not quite yet standardized. I think these basically start somewhere around 30 hectoliter an hour production and go on up from there. But if this is something that's interesting to you, you can certainly reach out to your rep from the Find a Rep button on our website that Tom mentioned, and we can take a look at what your process needs are, and then solicit an offer with Denwell on your behalf to sort of find something that will fit for you. And when this system was first introduced, of all of my colleagues, Tom was the one who made this most astute point. When he saw this thing, he said, man, this isn't a piece of equipment. This is a business plan that arrives in a sea container. So with that, asked to go to the last slide, and I think it's time for Q&A.
Thanks, Mike. I was going to say too, I've talked to a couple different contract facilities as well, and sometimes they're just bringing in tanker trucks, right? Of maybe it's beer, maybe it's hard seltzer, maybe it's spirits, but that's essentially your starting point, right? It's going to be you hook up to it, and you can put it into your tank ready to package. So
basically.
So we do have a few questions coming in. The first one, I believe it's referring to the Carbo-Blender. How many sources or inlets besides the deaerated water and CO2 and beer does it have?
That would be, as far as like the broad sources of material that you need to connect, that's basically it. Apart from, you need to hook it up to electrical as well. Tom, do you see it that way as well?
Yeah, maybe I did mention, typically it's deaerated water, but I mean, if you're doing high gravity brewing and blending down to an alcohol content spec, that's what you're going to be using. There's nothing saying that you can't be, like you pointed out, you can't be using lemonade either, but typically it's a deaerated water product that is being blended through. So you get that your product stream, whether that's beer or seltzer, and then the CO2.
So the next question we have coming in, it says, I find that craft brewers tend to be distrustful on the automation in these and are concerned about relying on the system to hit targets of flavor blending and hitting the target ABV. So my team wants to run from blender to a tank, do QC, then run tank to filler. This seems to defeat the purpose. Any thoughts on this?
My honest thought is, I think that's how you would want to do it anyway, whether or not for QC purposes. But I think it's always a challenge to run directly off of pieces of equipment like this straight to the filler. If for no other reason than we all know that fillers don't always run 100% reliably 100% of the time. So you'd want to have some type of a buffer capacity to to account for if you're running at your top flow rate on the filler, your top production rate somewhere in the middle, if it's jogging, if something wacky's happened and you need a few minutes to get it sorted out or clear whatever the error is. So yeah, I mean, the point is that using a piece of equipment like we've discussed on your way to a buffer tank or even a batch size tank is just going to save you a lot of time, effort, hassle, money, while gaining you consistency, right? Instead of having to make this stuff batch wise in a tank. Tom, do you have anything to add?
No, I agree with that. As you pointed out, things don't always work maybe the way they should in a brewery, in any production facility. And having that ability to have a buffer tank or like a bright tank, gives you lots of different options. I know personally that, lines go down, sometimes they go down for 10 minutes and sometimes they go down for 10 hours. If you have that ability to put it into a tank, that is the best option. If they were referring to the accuracy of the analyzers, I'm not sure if that was the question exactly, but they are highly accurate for sure. But I think that we would both recommend that things like CO2 content should be checked in the tank once it gets to where it's going. And with alcohol, there are TTP approved apparatuses to double check it. So.
Yeah, and I mean, we would have reference instrumentation on the unit if it were an analyzer controlled one. And then, yeah, you would want to do the standard due diligence that you would before, releasing a product for packaging or from packaging for sale anyway. I mean, this is just standard good practice. Basically, what these pieces of equipment are doing are saving you a lot of time and, money that by efficiently dosing the inputs.
And it looks like we got one final question coming in. And I think you touched on this a little bit already, but can the units blend spirits into soda for cocktails? Spirits will be 125 to 190 proof.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I would say that would be no problem. I mean, if we look at the blending capability, we can do up to 100%. Right. So just it kind of depends on what your inputs are, how far we're cutting them down. I mean, if there's any other concerns that need to be addressed in your specific application, like if we need explosion proof or whatever, right? It all kind of depends on what your application is. But, as we tried to point out, Denwell is very flexible. And if we know what the parameters are and what your starting materials are and what you're looking to produce in the end, we can come up with a solution for that. I can say that with a fair degree of confidence.
And we got another question coming in. Can I run from a fermenter through a filter or centrifuge, then to the skid?
Really, it all kind of depends on whatever the output of the centrifuge and the filter are. And, just similarly, like we just discussed with fillers, these things can maybe run at a variable rate depending on what the input quality of the product is that's going through these things. So is it theoretically possible? Yes. Would it maybe be a better idea to have a buffer or a batch tank ahead of the skid? You may want to consider that as well. I don't know, Tom, what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a large tank, right? It's just enough to get you that flexibility to for instance, when the separator centrifuge discharges, right? There's a lack of flow at that point. So when you have those little hiccups in your process, a small buffer tank can really save you a lot of headache. So
I would just add that, if any one of these questions that we've taken here today, if we didn't quite get to the heart of what you were looking for in an answer, or if anybody who's watching should come up with a question later on, again, go back to that find your rep section and just, find your rep and ask the question based upon, I saw this webinar and I had a thought and I wanted to try to get my question answered, and you can certainly handle it that way too.
It looks like that's all the questions that we have for right now.
Thank you, Peter. All right. So as I mentioned, this is the third of 5 webinars we're doing on the Denwell equipment. So the next one's going to be Tuesday, July 27th, and we're going to be touching on deaerated water. I brought it up. We talked about today about that's your blending material. we're going to be talking about why you need it, not just for carbo blenders, but for everything else in your brewery. There are so many different uses for distilled water in a production plant that maybe you know all of them, maybe you don't, but I encourage you to attend and find out. And then the last one on August 10th is CIP and how that can make your life easier. I would also say make your life safer as well. And as Mike touched on just a moment ago, if you do have questions, if you're watching the fact and you have questions, just head over to gusmerenterprises.com and click on the Find a Rep button. Enter in your city and state and find your rep. Reach out to them and they should be able to answer any questions you have. My contact information is there below too. So if you do have questions specific to anything I said today, feel free to reach out. And just thank you. Thank you for attending and we appreciate your time and attention today.